Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going on a journey to explore the history of the occult.
Ooh, sounds intriguing.
It is, and trust me, it's a lot more than just spells and Ouija boards. We're talking about a quest for hidden knowledge that has spanned millennia. I'm really excited to dig into this one. We've got John Michael Greer's book, The Occult Book, a chronological journey from alchemy to Wicca, and a bunch of other fascinating sources to guide us.
I'm ready to learn. Where do we even begin with something as vast as the history of the occult?
So let's rewind all the way back to the 6th century BCE, ancient Greece, the land of philosophers, and as it turns out, some pretty early occultists too.
Really? I always associate ancient Greece with, like, Socrates and logic and stuff.
But remember Pythagoras, the guy with the famous theorem. He wasn't just a math whiz. Turns out he was the leader of this secret society called the Brotherhood.
No way! The math guy was into secret societies.
Yep, they were all about reincarnation, the power of numbers, and geometry. They believed shapes and numbers had hidden meanings, like a secret code to the universe.
So they were looking for those hidden patterns and connections, kind of like today's physicists searching for the theory of everything.
Exactly. It's this idea that there's more to reality than meets the eye. And they weren't the only ones thinking this way. Think of Plato, another big name in Greek philosophy. He believed in a world beyond our senses, a world of perfect forms. It resonated with occultists for centuries to come.
A world of perfect forms. It's like those philosophical ideas set the stage for later occult thinking, right?
Absolutely. And along comes Empedocles, who introduces this theory of the four elements, fire, air, water, and earth, as the building blocks of everything.
Oh, yeah. The four elements. That's still a huge part of so many spiritual and mystical traditions today.
Right, it's like he provided this framework for understanding how the world works, both physically and spiritually. And these ideas weren't just confined to Greece. Around the same time in Mesopotamia, people were already developing horoscopes.
Whoa, horoscopes way back then. People have always been looking to the stars for guidance.
Seems like it. Greer even mentions the Venus tablet of Amisaduqa from 1650 BCE, proof that people have been trying to decode the heavens for a very long time.
It's mind-blowing to think about that kind of historical connection. We're not that different from those ancient stargazers.
It makes you realize how deep-seated that desire is to understand our place in the cosmos. But of course, the history of the occult isn't all sunshine and starry insights. There's a darker side too.
Oh, I was just thinking that. What happens when these beliefs clash with those in power?
Well, Greer points to the Roman outlawing of the Bacchic mysteries in 186 BCE as an early example of suppression. These were religious rituals dedicated to Bacchus, the god of wine and ecstasy.
Ooh, Bacchus. Those rituals sound kind of wild.
Some accounts describe them that way, drunken revelry, maybe even some criminal activity.
Yeah.
It's hard to know for sure because the main sources were written by those who wanted to shut them down.
So, could be propaganda or exaggeration to justify cracking down on a group they saw as a threat.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so tricky. Was it genuine concern or just a way to eliminate competition? Either way, it set a dangerous precedent.
A precedent that unfortunately we see repeated throughout history, right? Like with the persecution of early Christians or even the witch hunts later on.
It's a recurring theme, for sure. Those in power seeing secret rituals and hidden knowledge as a threat to their authority. It makes you wonder how much valuable knowledge was lost due to fear and intolerance.
It's a sobering thought. But amidst all that darkness, there were still some incredible figures pushing the boundaries of knowledge, like Miriam the alchemist.
Miriam. I was so fascinated to learn about her, this Jewish woman in 1st century BCE Alexandria making groundbreaking discoveries in alchemy.
Right. She's credited with inventing the double boiler, something we still use in kitchens today. Talk about an enduring legacy.
And to think, she was doing all of this at a time when women were often excluded from intellectual pursuits. It makes you wonder how many other unsung heroes of the occult are out there, just waiting to be rediscovered.
There must be so many. And then you have Zosimus of Panopolis, another major figure in alchemy, writing around 300 CE. His texts really get into the mystical and spiritual side of alchemy, linking it to personal transformation.
So it's not just about turning lead into gold.
Definitely not. For Zosimus and many others, the transformation of metals was a metaphor for the transformation of the soul. Alchemy was about pushing the boundaries of what's possible, both physically and spiritually.
It's like they were tapping into the hidden potential within matter and within themselves.
Precisely. Which brings us to a figure whose connection to the occult might surprise you, Jesus. Now, before anyone gets upset, we're just looking at what the sources say. But some scholars suggest that Jesus may have been perceived as a magician during his lifetime.
Whoa, hold on. Jesus as a magician.
Hear me out. Some early Christian and Jewish writings describe Jesus performing miracles and exorcisms in ways that could be interpreted as magical. Plus, there's the whole story of the Magi, those wise men who followed a star to find Jesus. They were astrologers, which was definitely considered a cult back then.
That's a really interesting perspective. It makes you wonder how differently people viewed those events depending on their cultural context.
Right. What might seem miraculous in one context could be seen as magical in another. It all comes down to how you interpret those terms.
And maybe our modern understanding of magic has clouded how we view historical figures like Jesus.
It's definitely something to think about. But I think it's clear that we've just scratched the surface here. We've got Pythagoras, Plato, early astrologers, alchemists, and even potential interpretations of Jesus through the lens of magic.
So much to unpack. But before we get too overwhelmed, maybe it's time to define what we mean by occultism. Because so far, it seems like a pretty diverse collection of beliefs and practices.
Good point. Greer breaks it down into 5 core elements: magic, divination, initiation, alchemy, and occult philosophy, each with its own rich history and set of beliefs.
So it's more like a tapestry woven from different threads, each with its own story to tell.
Exactly. And by exploring each of those threads, we can start to unravel the mysteries of the occult and understand its enduring appeal throughout history.
Okay, I'm definitely ready to start unraveling. Let's dive into those 5 key areas, starting with magic. Is it really all about casting spells and summoning spirits like in the movies?
Well, it's not as simple as Hollywood makes it out to be, but the idea of using focused intention and ritual to cause change in the world,
Okay,
that's
yeah.
definitely a central theme.
Okay, so maybe not waving wands and shouting abracadabra, but there's a real belief in the power of intention and ritual to shape reality.
Yes, it's about tapping into unseen forces and energies to bring about desired outcomes. And this idea has manifested in countless ways throughout history, from ancient Egyptian rituals to modern practices like manifestation and energy healing.
So magic has evolved and adapted over time, but the core concept remains the same: harnessing the power of the mind and will to shape our reality.
Precisely. But that's just one piece of the puzzle. We still have divination, initiation, alchemy, and occult philosophy to explore.
Okay, you've definitely piqued my curiosity, but I think we need to pause here and let our listeners absorb all of this amazing information.
Sounds good to me. We'll be back soon to delve deeper into the fascinating world of the occult.
Okay, so we've laid some groundwork, explored some pretty early examples of occultism, but now, where are we headed?
Well, let's fast forward a bit. We're talking the Middle Ages now, a time when the church held a lot of sway. You might think occult practices went into hiding, but it's not quite that simple.
Well, I'm sure there are always people seeking hidden knowledge, no matter the time period.
Right. And even under the watchful eye of the church, occult knowledge found ways to survive. For example, in 1256, this text on astrological magic called the Picatrix was translated from Arabic into Latin, opened up a whole new world of knowledge to European scholars and occultists.
So even while the church is condemning certain practices, other occult traditions are being studied and absorbed. It's this constant tension, isn't it?
Definitely. A push and pull between what's accepted and what's forbidden. But it shows how resilient these ideas are. And speaking of resilience, let's talk about John Dee. Now, he was a prominent figure, mathematician, advisor to Queen Elizabeth I.
Oh yeah, John Dee. I vaguely remember him from history class, but I had no idea he was involved in the occult.
Oh, he was deeply into it. In fact, he used astrology to choose the date for Queen Elizabeth's coronation in 1559.
No way. So even royalty were consulting with occultists.
Yep. It highlights how intertwined these ideas were with mainstream culture back then. Dee's interests went way beyond astrology, though. He was fascinated by angels, believed he could communicate with them and gain secret knowledge.
Angels. So he was advising the queen on earthly matters and trying to tap into celestial wisdom.
Exactly. He used a crystal ball and other methods of divination to try and reach those higher realms.
A royal advisor with a crystal ball, that's not something you see every day. It makes you realize how different the boundaries between science, religion, and magic were during those times.
Absolutely. People were still trying to figure out the world, and they were open to exploring different paths to knowledge. And sometimes those paths led them to the occult.
Okay, so we've got a royal coronation planned by an astrologer and attempts to contact angels. What else is going on in the world of the occult during this time?
Well, in 1628, there's this rather scandalous incident involving Pope Urban VIII. Apparently, he hired a magician to cast spells against his enemies.
Wait, the Pope? The head of the Catholic Church? I thought they were totally against magic.
You'd think. But even those in positions of religious authority sometimes turn to these practices, whether out of desperation or a genuine belief in their power.
It just goes to show that the occult was woven into the fabric of society at all levels, from everyday people to the most powerful figures of the time.
Right. And moving into the 17th century, we see figures like William Lilly. He was a really prominent astrologer who published a book called Christian Astrology in 1647. Pretty clever.
Christian astrology. Was he trying to reconcile those two worldviews?
Exactly. He framed his astrological insights within a Christian context, making them more acceptable to the religious authorities. A smart move to keep those traditions alive.
It shows how adaptable those occult ideas could be. But this period also saw those horrific witch hunts, one of the darkest chapters in human history. Where do those accused of witchcraft fit into all of this? Were they actually practitioners of the occult?
It's a tough question. It's likely some were practicing herbalism, folk magic, maybe divination. Things would connect to the occult, but so many were scapegoats, accused based on flimsy evidence or just because they were different.
A terrifying reminder of how quickly fear and paranoia can lead to the persecution of innocent people. But if occult ideas were so widespread, even among those in power, why were these accusations taken so seriously?
That's the key, isn't it? Those in power often use accusations of occult practices to control and eliminate those seen as threats. Whether it's the Romans with the Bacchic mysteries or the witch hunts, there's this fear of secret knowledge, of those who possess it.
It's about who has access to knowledge and how it might disrupt the existing power structures.
Precisely. But despite these periods of intense persecution, the occult never truly vanished. It was driven underground, kept alive by those who refused to let those traditions die out.
There's something powerful about those occult ideas. Their ability to survive even the harshest conditions speaks to our desire to understand the mysteries of the universe, to find our place in it.
Absolutely. And as we get closer to the modern era, these traditions continue to adapt and change. We see a resurgence of interest in the 19th and 20th centuries.
I'm ready to see how this all unfolds. How do those ancient traditions meet the modern world?
That's what we'll explore next. Secret societies, spiritual revolutions, the rise of modern occultism as we know it.
Okay, so we've made it to the modern era, the 19th and 20th centuries, a time of huge changes, socially, scientifically. What happens to the occult during this time?
It's like this perfect storm brews, right? You've got people kind of disillusioned with traditional religion. You've got groundbreaking scientific discoveries challenging old beliefs.
So there's this void, and people are searching for new ways to understand the world and themselves.
Exactly. And many turn back to those ancient occult traditions, reimagine them for a new age. You see groups like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn pop up, attracting some pretty prominent figures too, like the poet W.B. Yeats.
Wait, the W.B. Yeats, the Nobel Prize winner.
Yep. He was deep into the Golden Dawn, exploring ceremonial magic, tarot, all that good stuff. It really shows you how these seemingly separate worlds were colliding.
So occult ideas are moving beyond those fringe groups and influencing art, literature. It's fascinating.
Totally. And speaking of influential figures, we can't forget Aleister Crowley. Bit of a controversial character.
Oh, I've heard the name. Something about the Great Beast 666.
That's him. Brilliant guy, but definitely prone to pushing boundaries. He developed his own system of magic and philosophy, called it Thelema.
Thelema, what's that all about?
Personal liberation, mainly. The idea of pursuing your true will. Crowley was kind of a rebel, shaking things up in the occult world.
I can see why he's such a polarizing figure. But it's interesting how these individuals took those ancient traditions and made them relevant for their time, reinterpreted them, often in pretty dramatic ways.
Yeah. And it wasn't just ceremonial magic having a moment. Astrology was making a huge comeback, too.
Astrology. Always a popular one, I guess.
Right. In 1914, there's this American astrologer, Evangeline Adams. She's put on trial for fortune-telling.
Oh, no. What happened?
She was acquitted. Big win for astrology. It helped legitimize it. And soon you had astrology columns popping up everywhere. Newspapers, magazines.
Wow, from the courtroom to mainstream media, it's like these practices, once condemned, are gaining wider acceptance.
And this trend continued. In the mid-20th century, new psychological and spiritual movements emerge. And they're drawing from occult ideas, too. Even Carl Jung, the famous psychiatrist, was into it.
Carl Jung, the introvert-extrovert guy.
The one and only. He was really interested in alchemy and symbolism. saw a connection between the alchemical process and his concept of individuation, that process of becoming a whole person.
So those ancient practices were like metaphors for the journey of self-discovery.
Exactly. Jung believed we could learn a lot about the unconscious mind by studying those old symbols and rituals. Tap into our potential for growth and transformation.
That's really cool. Makes you wonder who else might have been secretly influenced by these ideas.
Yeah.
But we also have to talk about modern spirituality, Wicca, paganism, even the New Age movement. All of those have roots in these older occult traditions, right?
Yep. Think of it like this. Those ancient ideas are still alive, just wearing different clothes. A great example is Dane Rudhyar, British occultist who published a book in 1936 called The Astrology of Personality. It emphasized a more psychological, humanistic approach to astrology.
So less about predicting the future, more about understanding yourself.
Right. Modern occultism is about using that hidden knowledge to live a more meaningful life, not just accumulating it.
Wow, we've covered so much. From ancient Greece to the 20th century, from secret societies to personal transformation. It's been quite a journey.
It has. And I think the big takeaway is that the occult is constantly evolving. It's a reflection of this deep human need to understand the universe, to seek out the hidden and the mysterious massive.
Well said. And for those who want to delve even deeper, I highly recommend checking out John Michael Greer's The Occult Book. It's a fascinating read.
And as you continue exploring, think about this. What mysteries are you drawn to? What hidden knowledge are you seeking? The occult reminds us that there's always more to discover, both within ourselves and in the world around us.
That's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the occult. Until next time, keep exploring.